Beginning of transmission. Victory. At. C. Americas. Forgotten. Valor. The U.S. Navies. Armed guard. And Americas merchant seaman service sacrifice success
I don't know where that's coming from. Plug in here somewhere. Well, with that dramatic introduction to the subject for tonight, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening, Milton Kremer, signalman, World War II veteran, Navy man. You're on.
Thank you and welcome to Holy Trinity, the Armed Guard.
I don't know if yours is turned up.
Can't hear you.
Turned it off. Yeah. You turned it off.
And America's Armed Guard and America's Merchant Seamen. Now before we get started, so that everyone pretty much knows what they're seeing up here, I think I'll semaphore the entire alphabet and name it phonetically. The phonetics of today are not the phonetics of yesterday, but yesterday is what we're talking about. So, yesterday's phonetics: Abel, Baker, Charlie, Easy, Dog. Now that's on either side, depending on how a word ends. If it's ED, it's easier on this side. If it's AD, the D is easier on this side. The flags I have here are not necessarily attached would not necessarily be attached to my arms if I were aboard a ship, because these things would be much longer, but because of heights, because I want you to see what's going on, I cut them off so they're going to be part of my arms. We got the Dog: Easy, Fox, George, Hal, Interog, Jig, King, Love, Mike, Negative, Option, Prep or Preparation, Q is opposite Y, Q, R, Roger, Sugar, Tear, Uncle, Victor, William, X-ray, Yoke, Zebra. That may help you a little bit. I hope so. Tonight we're going to be talking about communications, convoy, and I guess that's it. We'll be going through the process of acquainting you with the armed guard, with the communications, and with the convoy we'll talk about later. Of course, I will mention the convoys that I have been in. Goods and troops delivered on time, where they were needed, mostly by American and Allied fighting forces the world over. A mighty task force, the world's greatest delivery system. The Merchant Marine and their protectors, the Armed Guard. Navy gunners manning Navy guns on American ships were sailing the war zone before the United States declared war. First to get in action, these armed guards had more than 200 encounters with submarines, many of them long fought battles. First in service, they were first in sacrifice. The armed guard has met the enemy oftener on more divergent fronts than any other fighting force. Every ship was its own unique fighting force. They sailed on flagged ships of many nations: Belgium, Brazil, Greece, Italy, China, Norway, Panama, and Poland. During World War I, they sailed on 384 ships. During World War II, they sailed on 6,233 ships. By the way, Humphrey Bogart was a signalman in the Armed Guard in World War I. They died on rusty old freighters, jarred apart by a torpedo, or a tanker in an inferno of flames they choked to death, or were incinerated in oil-covered waters. They starved to death, or died of thirst on rafts in the tropics. To serve in the Armed Guard, you had to be of excellent health and have excellent vision, especially night vision. There were no doctors on board the ships they served in. Their number totaled 144,930 enlisted men and officers. Signalmen and radiomen made up 15,000 of that group. The rest were gunner's mates, bosun mates, and officers. The Armed Guard and the Merchant Service suffered far more losses, suffered far more losses in excess to their size. Their losses were greater than in excess to their size. In 1941, the United States had 900 dry cargo ships and 440 tankers. More than 1,700 ships had been lost, but the Maritime Service had delivered 268 million tons of cargo, a total neither the Germans nor the Japanese High Command could believe. Back to the
Okay. Let me turn it up a little.
That's right.
I'm leaving that one over there. Now I'll do that.
Well, I'll do this one.
I have one question. I noticed that when you did the signs for victory and for US, it looked very similar. Is it how your arms are placed or something?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you had two things that went up similar.
Testing.
I'll do this.
Okay, let me just read it. Let me read it first. This will help you some. Could we as a nation do it again? We did it before, and we can do it again.
Could we, as a nation, do it again? We did it before, and we can do it again. Now I'll be sending, the first one was just an introductory slow thing, but I'll be sending a semaphore and flashing light at about 10 to 15 words a minute. That is the way it is done in the service. And that's about as fast as we send it, either in convoy or in the fleet. They started out as a small, scantily band of men, but by war's end, they became the most highly trained specialists in the armed service. They had to be, because their duties and responsibilities were awesome. On each ship, there was one signalman, one radioman, a bosun mate, and 18 to 20 gunners, depending on the armament. And of course, a commanding officer whose rank was Lieutenant JG, somewhere in that line. Ours was a lieutenant. And besides having to keep himself up to date, he had the gunners to train, and he had the signalmen and the radiomen to keep. You had to have them keep up with their rigorous training, because they were alone. No matter what happened, they had to take care of it. I entered the Navy in 1942, in early 1942. My boot training was at Bainbridge, Maryland. Anyone ever knows about Bainbridge, Maryland, the early part of the war, it was a mud track. It was mud up to your shins and above, and it was really something. There was no such thing as drilling. Most of the drilling we did, marching that is, was in the barracks. But after basic training, I was I and 134 electricians and electrician wannabes headed toward the University of Kentucky to the electrician school, the Naval Electrician School. Well, we got to Pittsburgh the following morning by train, and our orders changed. Seems they need signalmen more than they needed electricians, so they headed us out to the University of Chicago and the Naval Communications School. Here our schooling consisted of saturation, semaphore, and flashing light, and other related classes. Our daily routine consisted of sitting in a darkened room and a light similar to this up here on the wall, and someone sitting down at a table with a key, sending flashing light, just sending it. We sat there and for weeks we stared at it until it got through. And finally when the light went on up here, we began to understand some of the things they were sending. They were sending about anything that came into their mind, their liberty, whatever happened on their liberty. That sometimes was laughable. We wondered at first why some people laughed and others didn't. Well, we knew that the ones that laughed understood it, and the ones that didn't. So, flashing light in itself can be very difficult. It takes semaphore takes a lot of practice, and more practice. For instance, and our semaphore, we stood outside the gymnasium on the track field, and we stood out there 3 hours every day. 3 hours every morning flashing light, 3 hours every afternoon semaphore. And we stood there and the same thing happened there. We just stared at them until we started to understand it. And we had people living in apartments around it. And they understood every word. They were having a ball. They knew what was going on. They'd come out every afternoon just to see the show and see what the chief petty officers had done on their liberty. These guys had to be careful what they said because some of the things they said were. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. And at night in the barracks after dinner at night, was when a lot of our practice took place, especially semaphore. We would gather together in groups and just talk to each other in semaphore. We were told, visualize, visualize, visualize. If you couldn't visualize it, you couldn't see it in your head, you couldn't send it. So you go to bed at night, all you did was visualize till you fell asleep. You visualized every character, every semaphore character. And so we would talk together in the barracks, across the barracks. No matter where we were talking in semaphore. One night, Chief got us together and put us, and he said to meet in the room where we all sat to study, somewhere besides the barracks. It was a rather large room, and he said the only way you can get in that room is by semaphoring permission to get in there, and when you get in there, there will be no talking. All conversation was to be nothing but semaphore. So 2.5 hours. If you wanted to say something, you had these in your hand, or you didn't. Because a lot of it was done without the flags. You sort of waved your hand if you wanted the floor. And that's the way it went. So one night, Chief came in there. He said, "I have a great idea." He said, "Unless you're precise, unless you're sharp, you won't be able to send semaphore because you can't be halfway there with a signal. You have to be right there." So he says, "What we're going to do tonight, we're going to ask each one of you a question or give each one of you a statement from a magazine or a book or something, a sentence, and you'll send it, not blindfold, but with your eyes closed." So let's try that. I have a story about Franklin Delano Roosevelt that's rather cute. It's a few sentences long, but it's rather humorous. Okay, Don.
Franklin Roosevelt who loved the sea made no secret of the fact.
Made no secret of fact
that his favorite branch of the service
that favorite branch of the
Was the Navy.
Navy.
At one meeting with,
That's a period. At one meeting
with General George C. Marshall,
with General George C. Marshall,
then Army Chief of Staff,
then now that's a mistake, so this is the way we correct it, with a series of these. Now we go back to the last word sent properly. Let's go back to Army. Army Chief of Staff.
FDR's partiality was so apparent
FDR's, that's an S. Partiality was so apparent
that Marshall felt obliged to protest.
that, whoops, getting ahead of myself, that Marshall that Marshall felt obliged. I think I've logged me again. Obliged to protest.
Mr. President, he said,
Mr. President, he said,
please don't refer to the Army.
please don't refer to the Army
as them and the Navy as us.
the Navy as them and the Navy as us. Now, you don't know whether I made those mistakes on purpose or I just goofed, right? 50-50. That gives you some idea of the training that we went through, and that went on and on and on for about 4 months. And when we graduated from there, we were sent to Milton Heights, Connecticut, to Convoy Communications School. Now, there we got some real high-density flag hoist. All convoys are maneuvered by flag hoist. The commodore of the convoy uses flag hoist only to maneuver his ships, depending on whether it's around a storm, through a fog, around a wolf pack, or whatever. He uses flag hoists to do that. Now, while I was trying to think of how I could explain flag hoist, I decided it was better to see what I had in the basement and build a ship's mast and yard arm and put a few flags on it so that you could see rather than have to visualize. So I put together a mast and a yard arm. You see it here. Can everyone see it? I'll explain it. The flag, the American flag, always flew up at up the top of the mast when we were in foreign port. In port, 8 o'clock in the morning, the flag went up, sunset, it went down. Same thing in a foreign port. But in a foreign port, when you're coming into port, you always fly the flag of the port you're going into. It flies as long as you're there, and when you leave the port at a certain point, it comes down. The American flag stays up there for the rest of that day, but from then on, at sea, the flag flew here, at the foretop. But that's a Canadian flag. Now, the flag you see here is the identifying international flag signal for the Colorado. That's the tanker I was on, the Texaco tanker I was on for 21 months. King, Baker, Fox, second repeater. It repeats the second flag down, Fox. So the call was King, Fox, Baker, Fox. All ships have international call signs, including Navy ships, but they do not start with the letter with King. They start with an N, N for Navy, naval. I have two signals up, Negate Charlie and Victor Charlie. Negate Charlie is a merchant marine distress signal, as is the answer. Negate Charlie means I am in deep distress and I require assistance immediately. So the ship that sees it, that they're sending it to, obviously they wouldn't put it up unless there's another ship around. This ship, Victor Charlie, means I have seen your distress signal and I will see that you get immediate assistance. That's what that means. There were quite a number of single flag meanings. When one single flag went up, you knew exactly what was happening. The Baker flag, for instance, now that's down, it should be all the way up, but because of the size of the flags, that should be all the way up. And it's when the Baker flag flies, that means you're handling ammunition, you're on a firing range, or you're shifting ammunition.
Taking on fuel.
What's that?
Taking on fuel.
Taking on fuel, that's another one, thank you, yes. I called a few people I didn't remember them all the meanings to the single flag, so I called a few people to help me out here, and that's right, taking on fuel. This one here is a special Navy flag. It's called the SOPAS flag. That doesn't mean, fellas, your deodorant slip hit the showers. That means senior officer present aboard. Senior officer, whether it be the commander of a battle force, a squadron, a division, or whatever. If he is on board, you can either go visit him, send him know that it's all right to send him a message or whatever. But when that comes down, you know he's gone ashore or he's not on board the ship. That's what that single flag means. Now, the A flag, or the able flag, was affirmative. It answered a question. Am I allowed to do this? And that flag went up, affirmative. That means yes, you can do it. Yes, you have my permission. That usually comes from a Commodore, not a Commodore, that's only a Navy meaning. The only flag, single flag that flew on a merchant ship during the war, as I understand it, was the H flag. Now when that H flag flies, whether it's in a fleet ship or whether it's in a merchant ship, it means that I have a pilot on board. Those of you who have gone on cruises have seen that flying. As long as that flag is flying, the pilot is on board, and when he takes one step into the pilot boat from the ship, down it comes. He's gone. The Baker flag I've told you about. The H flag is the pilot. The I flag, interlog, ask a question. Ask a question. The K flag, of course, king means go ahead in any kind of signal, whether it's flashing light or whether it's semaphore. And a Roger, of course, means I have received your message and will act on it. Queen is a quarantine flag. If the ship for any reason is in quarantine, that flag flies as long as the ship is in quarantine. And you don't usually see that unless the ship is in port. The only reason it would be in quarantine would be for diseases of some kind brought back, or they've come from a country that has problems health-wise, and it remains in quarantine until the port directors sort it out, and then it comes down. Never missed it. You have one. The one you see underneath my flag hoist here is prep, or preparation. That is prepare. That means when that is above a signal, that means prepare to carry out any of the messages that show up on the flag hoist. Now, flag hoist, when you have flag hoist, and the flag hoist comes from another ship or another commander, you have a spotter, you have someone that's bending on flags, you have someone that's holding them up, and you have someone that's writing down the flags in the order. Now, each side of the flag bag, each side of the mast contains 3 halyards, signal halyards, and each 3 halyards has its own separate flag bag, one single alphabetical grouping of flags and numerals, 1 to 0. The flags come out this way, with their one behind the other. You have the signal halyard is much like your own flag halyard at home. If you have a flagpole, there's a clip on it to fasten to the flag. Now, the one end of the flag has a ring on it, and the other side has the clip. Excuse me. And as the spotter spots these flags coming out of the flag bag, he snaps it to the ring. Of course, when this end comes out, it has the cook ready to go on the ring of the next flag. And therefore, the trick is to see this color coming out of the flag bag and be the first one with that thing up the halyard. Now, the men I trained at my signal bridge, I trained them to see that about that much of the flag coming out of the flag bag. And they had to bend on the flag as soon as it was spotted coming out of that flag bag. Prep, boom, up it went. As soon you were doing this rather than hesitating each flag going up the halyard. This is known as knowing your stuff. It's known as proficiency, and once in a while you heard about it for being much too smart because you beat the guy up the halyard that was sending it. I heard about that a few times. So that is flag hoist. There were other things that we learned at Convoy Communication School. We learned zigzag procedures. When there's a danger of a wolf pack hitting a convoy, there are certain zigzag procedures that have to be followed, and that is in your convoy orders. Everything down to the course and the speed you you have to follow doing zigzag. Imagine 200 ships out there and they say zigzag. You better zig before someone zags and you've had it. So you had to follow them very closely. So it was on zigzag orders, verbal talk procedures. That is, every man on board the ship wore headphones, whether he was on the bridge, whether he was on the bow watch, the stern, or whether he was in the engine room. They wore headphones. Headphones went through the bridge. That was the only time you could talk. If you had something to say or report to the bridge, you could not back the breeze with anybody else on those headphones. It was strictly to the bridge. You couldn't tie the headphones up if someone saw something out on the horizon or even closer. You had to be able to report to the bridge so action could be taken, whether it was a problem in the engine room or wherever. So there was high-frequency radio talk and general convoy operations, we learned about those, and merchant ship commands. And that was pretty much what happened up there. And of course, there was that flashing light and semaphore that you had to keep right on going with, because semaphore wasn't used all that much in any of the convoys that I was in. Mostly it was flashing light and flag hoist. They were the two main, the most important, of course, being flag hoist. Now, when we graduated from up there, we were sent from there to Brooklyn, the Armed Guard Center in Brooklyn. Everyone who was put on board a ship on the East Coast was sent to Brooklyn, New York, the Armed Guard Center. And you stayed there until, you had no duty, you stayed there until you were assigned to a ship. Well, I lasted 3 days. My ship was ready in New York, near the George Washington Bridge. She was anchored out in the middle of the stream, all ready to go. We had, the ship itself carried 166,000 barrels of oil, plus its own fuel. It was a brand new ship. She was built about 18 months before I got on board her, as was 4 or 5 others, or maybe 6 others that Texaco had built for peacetime. These were built in peacetime. And she had a battleship bow and twin screws. It could do 22 knots or 23¼ miles per hour loaded. Now, what we did when we loaded, we loaded our planes. We loaded our planes in New York. We had planes that we took over. That's how the planes didn't fly over there, the fighter planes. They were taken over there on tankers for the most part. We had spar decks that were fastened to the well deck, between the bow and the midships housing, and between the midships housing and the rear deck housing. The planes were the engines for 4 or 5 planes were battened down forward, and the fuselages between the two housings, the midships and the rear deck. And we loaded them in New York. From New York, we went to Aruba or Curacao to pick up our cargo, and from there we went to Port of Spain, Trinidad, inside the submarine nets with a lot of other ships waiting there for a convoy to form. And when the ships arrived, and rather still when the Commodore arrived, and ordered the convoy to sea, they formed the convoy immediately upon leaving Port of Spain. The sailing orders issued by the Commodore of the convoy to all ships' captains and their armed guard officers were as follows. There shall be no surrender or abandoning ship so long as the guns can be fired, and any chance the ship can be saved. The armed guard will remain thereon Equally, the master's orders to abandon ship do not apply to the armed guard, who were to remain on board until their commanding officer told them to abandon ship. And these orders had very broad implications. One very humorous broad implication is this: a young recruit who was to be go into the radio shack, his first radio shack aboard the ship, asked the chief signalman just how that applied to him. How long should he stay at his post? You can imagine what the chief signalman said. He said, until the water is up to your eyeballs and the barracudas are nibbling at your butt. So, I guess that gives you a pretty good idea. There were several instances that I have read about and I've heard about where the armed guard gunners did stay at their posts until they were almost hip deep in water and firing their guns. You got to give these guys a lot of credit. Without the gunners, we'd have been nowhere. They were a gutsy group. And we were very lucky to remain on the Colorado for 21 months together. Very rarely do armed guardsmen remain on a ship more than a year. They're either transferred to another ship, given them there and then given another ship, or they request another ship. That works too. Well, it did if there was room and you could get to another ship and someone take your place. But it was unusual. We did not lose a member of our crew, armed guard or merchant, in the whole 21 months I was with the Colorado. And you can imagine we were quite an ocean-going family by the time the war was over and we were finally transferred. To get back to communications, convoy communications took many varied and secretive and restricted forms, always with the safety of the convoy uppermost at all times. Now there were other than semaphore, flashing light, flag hoist, and then there was the incoming radio signals. No radio signals were allowed to be sent out by the ship. Every sub in the world could know where you were if you sent that out. The only thing that came into the ship was through the radio, and there was two different forms. One was BAMS. It was BAMS, British American Merchant Signals. These came out of Long Island, New York, and out of Norfolk. They were sent out at 500 kilocycles, a very, very weak signal. By the time the convoy or the ships got halfway to where they were going on the ocean, those signals were so weak they could no longer be heard. So, at certain particular times of the day that were designated in the convoy orders, there was another one, Fox. Fox was sent out from Washington, from London, and from Reykjavik, Iceland, to the ships bound from Murmansk and Archangel, and in Russia. And these Fox signals were sent at, of course, Morse, and this is sound, 25 words a minute normally. I spent a lot of time in the radio shack just sitting and listening to that to improve my proficiency in flashing light. And I got to the point where I could read that. Well, when you get to just jump ahead a little bit, when you dots and dashes, you can't, once you get to know the code well enough and you can read it up to 10 words a minute, you're not reading dots and dashes. We were told that. Didn't believe it, but we were told it. You're not reading the dots and the dashes, you're reading the intervals between the dots and the dashes. Sounds impossible, doesn't it? But that's what you were actually doing, the intervals between the dots and the dashes. My top speed was 22 words a minute, almost a constant blur. But I didn't attain that until I was about in my third or fourth year. In the meantime, we did a lot of practicing and batting the breeze at sea and wherever with flashing light also. So it was a constant thing to keep improving yourself, to keep it up, because you were alone out there. You were absolutely responsible for every signal that came and left the ship. You had the safety, you had the whole safety of the ship and its crew at your fingertips. And you had to be right. The radar was our eyes on the surface, sonar was our ears under the surface. As I said before, we had people on watch all over the ship to keep a watch. Some kept a watch from the bow watch kept their watch from the bow to midships on both sides. The bridge, of course, looked all over the place. The stern watch kept their watch from the stern to midships and out. That way, all 360 degrees of that ship was taken care of. Now, after the convoy orders were issued, the Colorado, as in all convoys we participated in, of course, I told you we loaded our planes in New York. We went down to Curacao, Port of Spain. We carried P-47s and P-51s. We delivered altogether in the 6 convoys the Colorado was sailed in, carried 36 planes over to Liverpool, England. Not all the ships went to Liverpool. We did. We unloaded our planes on lighters in Liverpool Harbor, and then proceeded up the inland waterway to Ellesmere Port, England, where to a refinery where we dumped our cargo. And for the next 5 or 6 days after the cargo was out, we had to gas free, because a ship is more dangerous without the cargo than with it. It's like putting a match to dynamite. All it took was a spark to set it off. And most of the tools that these people used on board the ship to work on deck, were rubber covered. And they had to be very careful not to make a spark. When we had a few days of liberty in Liverpool or in Chester, England nearby, we returned alone to New York. We traveled down the South Atlantic. We normally went to England Europe in the North Atlantic. We returned by the South Atlantic around the Azores, back to New York, did the same thing all over again, and the process was repeated six times.
Mind a question?
Yes.
Normal position of your flotilla, what number of ships would it be in, and where were you, on the ends of it, and also the armament what aboard?
Yeah, good. I'm getting to that. Thank you. The formation of the convoy was like this. Convoys consisted of the number of ships from up to 200 ships, horizon to horizon and over the horizon. They covered many hundreds of square miles, depending on the size of the convoy. And the way they lined up, they lined up with the ships on the port side of the convoy, lined up in lines which were 500 feet fore and aft, 1,000 feet starboard to port. That is roughly the position you had to maintain in convoy. And in a storm, or when there was danger, that was rather difficult. But roughly, you had to maintain that distance for safety. And the ships on the port side that lined up on the port side were the ones that normally went to Russia, the northern ports of Russia, Murmansk and Archangel. When they got to a particular place in the ocean, they were ordered to peel off. They peeled off, and off they went to Iceland to form a convoy to go north. Ships on the starboard side, they were the ones that were designated for North Africa and the Mediterranean. Ships in the middle, England, and the rest of Europe. Normally just England. The Commodore himself was always, unlike the British, The Commodore was on a convoy ship. The British is always on a ship of war. And it's usually, the Commodore usually is a commander or above in one of the admiral ranks, not the top admiral rank. The top admiral rank are the ones that give the orders, but normally you'd find a convoy the size of maybe 200 ships. You have a vice or a rear admiral there taking care of it. And his ship was the center ship up front, always the center ship up front. Now, as soon as the convoy was formed, he put up a signal that meant everybody put your international code, your international call sign up, and up they would go, and he would check them to see that you were in the right position. Well, the Colorado got out there one time in the wrong position, and we got called on it. Imagine a tanker in the center of a convoy that included troop ships, freighters, what have you. Convoy, normally, ammunition ships and tankers are at the extreme back part of the convoy or on the sides, never in the middle or in any way, whether it's in the dead center of the convoy or whether it's dead center of one of the lines. Tankers and ammunition ships belong back on the port of the starboard quarter or the back line. And so the Commodore got on us one time. After all those other hoists came down that were correct, ours went back up again. So you have to answer your flag hoist exactly. What he puts up, you put up. So he knows that you're right, and he knows that the right ship is answering. And this is what went on between the Commodore and the Colorado.
If there is honor or integrity.
No.
Oops. The Colorado. Colorado put in
Okay, we got it. So the Commodore sends the flashing light. We'll do it this way.
from the Commodore. What is your position?
What is, I'm going to get cute, you are, position, we did that a lot.
Colorado. Convoy plan puts us here.
Convoy, plan, put us here.
Commodore. Our error.
Our, you know what that means, don't you?
Sorry.
I don't know how to spell R anymore. Oh, you are. Error. Sorry,
Please change position.
please. He threw me for a loop there. Change, posit, P-O-S-I-T means position.
With ship 47.
With ship 47.
Good luck.
And we needed it. It took us about 4.5 hours to just drop back, stop our engines and drop back. And the other ship sort of skirted around us and got into position by going around the lines and coming in. But we dropped all the way back, and our position ended up to be the last ship on the port quarter. We got there about 4 hours later. It was about 6 o'clock at night. There was one submarine out there. We found this out later. There was one submarine out there. He had one torpedo left. He spotted the convoy. It was a 100-ship convoy. He spotted this convoy just before dusk, and he thought, well, I'm going to shoot and get out of here. This is one convoy where we had some escorts. Now that might sound funny, but a lot of convoys that went out had a few escorts. About the middle of the war, we began to get escorts to escort us on a complete convoy. But we had some DEs, we had a cruiser, and we had a dirigible. That was our first convoy out of New York to the lightship, one dirigible. But anyway, this guy figured he couldn't miss. So he fired, turned tail and left. But you can't guess what ship he hit. He hit number 47. He hit the one in the middle of the convoy that we changed places with. That ship, that convoy was going 12 knots at the time. And it was dark, or almost dark. Now the people that were fore and aft of that ship, and starboard to port of that ship, swears that that ship must have imploded. That means the bottom was blown out. And instead of a big explosion, or instead of the ship going down by the stern or by the head, she went straight down. Everybody, including the crew and the ship and the cargo, was lost. Not one person got off that ship. Not only that, that ship had 60-foot masts on it. And she went down so fast that the ship astern of it went over her without hitting the mast, and she was 30 feet in the water. We didn't find out about that until we got to England. I would say somebody was with us that day. The Commodore. He told us to get out of there. Now after our Colorado, after its 6 convoys in Europe, we were a fast ship, as I said before, and they took all fast ships out of convoy. That ships, I would guess, that went 15 knots or more. We did 22, and they sailed alone. And that means that when you're alone, there's a possibility that the men and the materials or whatever you carry as a cargo will get there faster, so that the people who need it have it quicker when they need it for their use. Well, we were sent to on a West African run, as you saw by this map over here. We ran the West African coast from Dakar down to the Belgian Congo. We hit about 6 or 7 ports along the way. Most of them Air Force installations that needed high test. We carried mostly high test gasoline. Now the Colorado, if I tell you a little bit about her, she don't look much like a luxury liner on what you see here. But most sailors' first love is his first ship, whether it be a rust bucket or a luxury liner. Well, ours I would consider a luxury liner for this reason. When Texaco gives a master a ship, it's his. And when they gave Captain Stevens the Colorado, he was allowed to appoint it in any way he could. That is, the staterooms, fore and aft, his quarters, his wardroom, the crew's quarters. So what he did, he loved mahogany. This guy, for instance, he was an old German sailing ship skipper. He was one of 5 skippers in the world at that time who held master's papers for sail and steam. And he and those 5 skippers, when they knew they were in any particular part of the world, they'd get together and they'd have dinner or what have you. They'd get together because there weren't that many sailing skippers around. And this guy knew his stuff, and he was a father figure and a grandfather figure to most of us. But the ship itself, all its staterooms, fore and aft, were lined in either black or blonde mahogany. Now on several of the trips we were on, he picked up mahogany for his own use in these West African ports. And the stateroom that I was in amidships, the captain's quarters, of course, was forward. The wardroom was down one deck, just above the well deck. And his quarters, of course, was near the bridge and the pilot house. And our quarters, the radio man and I, had large quarters on the starboard side of the ship. We had portholes you could almost pull a truck through. And it was a king size beds. Now these quarters were all made for peacetime and for passengers, and so you might know how beautiful they were. And all facilities, everyone had facilities within their own quarters. You didn't have to go back after the bathroom or coming up around Hatteras. You wouldn't want to try that anyway. But it was very beautifully appointed, fore and aft. Now the gunners and the communications people for the up front armament were all quartered in the midships housing. The armed guard officer had quarters across the hall from us. He had a beautiful room, and then the radio shack was just behind his quarters. Back aft, there was the galley, the crew's quarters, and the engineers. And all of their quarters were lined in exactly the same way. Now our armament consisted of a 3-inch 50 up forward in a gun tub. On the bridge, there was, on each corner of the bridge, there was twin 20 millimeters. On the after deck house, there was twin 40s. A 5-inch 50 in a gun tub on the stern. Now the cooks, they often worried about were we going to fire that thing back there, because every time they fired that, the galley was a mess. So they told the armed guard officer, don't ever fire that thing in practice until after lunch. Or there's no lunch. But the pipes would come down and, the soot all over everything. But of course, you got the message, and it never happened like that.
You ate real good on them, didn't you?
Oh, we ate beautifully on that. I'm just coming to that. You want to lick your chops for a minute? I'll tell you about a guy and what he has for breakfast every day. You won't believe it. But the food, we had fresh milk, fresh eggs, fresh meat. We had just about. We had a menu. Now a lot of guys I've talked to in the Armed Guard have told me that they had a menu too. It was written on a green board or a black board or posted up on a bulletin board. But ours was a printed menu every morning. Every day we had a printed menu. You could order anything you wanted on that menu. And that included a breakfast that was out of this world. So we had a quartermaster. Now there's 3 kinds of quartermasters in the service. A quartermaster naval, which I was the last 2 years of my tenure. I had to change the Navy changed its rating system, and I became a quartermaster signalman. Then I became a quartermaster, but still a signalman, however that was. They had a terrible time keeping people in the service after the war, so everybody had to know their job and a related job, or lose a strike. That was in 1946, 47. Then in 1948, they took the right arm rates, which were quartermaster, signalman, bosun, mate, and what else?
Gunners.
Gunners,
Fire controlman.
right? All those right arm rates went to the left arm. And there were no more right arm rates. And then we didn't have to defend ourselves on that one. Right, the left arm rates? Yep, deck ratings, you're right. And so, this guy, let me tell you how he had, what he had for breakfast. Now, this is what you don't have for This is what he had for breakfast. 3 hotcakes and 2 easy over eggs, stacked in this manner. In shortened manner. Hot cake. Butter. Egg. Ketchup.
How about SOS?
Butter. Egg. I guess we have 2 eggs on that now, don't we? All right, let's go to the ketchup. The 3rd hot cake. Okay, butter.
I don't know if that's so good.
And the coup de grace, maple syrup.
No coffee?
Cut up. And eaten with a soup spoon. Imagine that. Now, I have some advice for you. Try it tomorrow. But call
Your doctor.
9 1 first. I don't ever remember him having anything but that all the time. Nobody, we all went, when the first couple days he did this, he ate alone. We either arrived before or after him.
What do they call signalmen? What are
Skinny
those?
waivers, right?
What do they call it? What's those things in your hand? Call them flags.
Huh?
Call them flags.
Right. But anyway, we were called a lot of things.
But not late for breakfast.
Now, that's just about, when we are on our West African coast, our West African run, before I get to QQ-17, our West African run, like I said, we were on it for 9 months. Back to Curacao and Aruba for our fuel and down the west. We usually hit three or four of those West African ports, and then back and forth. But while we were over there, the first or second trip over there, things started to take shape on board that the captain had no control of, or if he did, he didn't care all that much. What he wanted was a happy crew, and he had it. We had a chimpanzee, we had a baboon, we had a monkey, a one-eyed monkey, Sally, she became our pet. She was the only one of those three animals that had full run of the ship. She loved bananas. I don't know what else she ate or what the cooks served her, but she loved bananas. We never found where she slept, never found any of her dirt, never found any banana skins. And she was a real pet of everyone on the ship. The other two animals were kept in cages on the stern. Now these were very young animals when we got them. And we had birds of every color, feather, and song. Oh, we were the noisiest ship on the run. And we had bananas, hands of bananas hanging all over the ship. We had flowers, we had coconuts, we had nuts, we had just about everything you could want. So we're in Lagos one time, and the captain is standing at the gangway. And he has just sort of this frown on his face. I said, "What's up, skipper?" I said, "You look troubled." He said, "I am." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "I'm thinking of narrowing this gangway about 2 feet." I said, "Why?" He said, "If I don't, tomorrow morning there's going to be an elephant on this thing." He had a tremendous sense of humor. He called me Shorty. I love taking over the watch of the quartermaster. Oh, get back to the quartermaster. Quartermaster in the Navy, on a naval ship, is a navigator. They mostly work with navigation. Quartermaster in the Army is a procurement officer, and they give things away. Quartermaster on board a merchant ship steers the ship. So, for the most, he had other duties, of course, but his main duty was steering the ship. And I loved to steer the Colorado. And the Colorado had one of these. You ever see one of these big ornate wheels, ship's wheels, beautiful big wooden ornate things? Well, this thing was about as big as I am, 5 feet. Imagine me trying to see the binnacle steering that thing. Impossible. I could hardly see through the spokes, let alone see the binnacle. So he had the carpenter build a box, much like that, and I stood on that to steer it. And he come up, and the captain come up one night, and he said, "Shorty," he says, "there's only one rock in this ocean, and I think you're going to hit it." He always called me Shorty. And he was a tremendous personality. So anyway, it came time for us to come home, and we had to get rid of the animals and the birds and what have you. Sally, we couldn't put her ashore. We couldn't put her ashore because she was a pet. We knew that if we put her ashore and left her loose in the jungle like the others, that she wouldn't last a day. So we were pulling into Bathurst that afternoon, and there was an army encampment there, U.S. Army encampment, and the staff sergeant took her, so we know she got a good home. But anyway, we were called home, and that was the end of that voyage. It was a tremendous experience. And I don't know how many other armed guardsmen, and I know there are a bunch of them in here tonight because there are some from my unit up in Folsington here. I don't know how many of them have ever had that kind of experience aboard ship, but that was my experience, and it was a tremendous experience.
Did you use TBS?
Yes, yes, we did. Yes. Between ships. Yeah, that was a very low frequency.
To those who don't know.
What's that?
The talk between ships, yeah, it was, no one else could, that was the only way you could communicate with them at night. There was another way you could communicate with them at night too, but it was, I don't know, I don't think I've ever used it, or tried to use it more than once. If you weren't good with a rifle, you weren't good. You had a rifle-like thing that had a barrel on it about that long, an opening about that big, and a light back here at the back where the trigger was. You could send a flashing light message at night, but it had to be next to you on either side or forward or back, and then relay, because you had to aim directly at the person you were signaling to, and only he could see that light. And it had a trigger on it that also gives you flashing light. Now let's see what we can do with some flashing light on.
Number 5.
You might see that I have jury rigged a few things, and I don't think any jury would admit doing it. But I ended up, I couldn't find a flashing light, so I had a jury rigged one. I have the, of course I have the lights. The lights work on each side of the arm. I figured as long as I was doing that, I might as well put lights on there too. And that makes it sort of authentic. But I jury rigged this up here. It's a stoplight bulb with the filaments wired together making a bright light. And while I was rehearsing with this thing, I was starting to see things in front of my eyes that weren't there, and I figured that's too bright. So I went down to the basement and looked around for something I could use. That's the lid off of the red spray can. So anyway, let's see what we got. Okay, Don.
If there is honor or integrity,
Yes. Or integrity.
serving in our nation's armed forces,
Serving in our armed forces.
then the glory and honor
Then the glory and honor
belongs to those
belongs belongs
to those who so proudly carried
knows who proudly carried
our nation's banner
our nation's banner
into those battles
into those battles
we all so vividly remember,
battles we all so vividly, oops, I don't know what that is. So vividly
See listening.
Remember?
Remember, and proudly so.
Remember? And proudly. So. Three A's in period.
Is that similar to Morse code?
What's that?
Is that really Morse code?
Yes. Yeah,
Today they're not using the Morse code.
probably not. Someone asked me how come I could remember all this after 50 years. Let me tell you something, to most of us in this room, 50 years is as 50 minutes, or it's 50 days. It comes back just like you remember where you were when Jack Kennedy was shot. Or you remember, a lot of people remember where they were and what they were doing when World War II broke out. There are 2 days stick in your mind. So it didn't take long. It took me about 3 or 4 days to come up to speed on both of these things, but you don't forget. It's like riding a bicycle, right? You never forget. Now, first we were sent home, and I was assigned to a freighter, and I was on there until they got rid of the guns and dumped the ammo all over. And they were taking the gun. The Navy crew had to stay on board these merchant ships until the guns were removed, until everything that belonged to the Navy was taken off them. Okay. Don, I think because of the hour, I think we'll. I want to go to the last segment because I have about. If you'll stick with me for another 12 minutes, 15 minutes, I want to tell you about a convoy that was the worst disaster. The most disastrous convoy in World War II, and that I think bears hearing. Let's go to the rest. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
We who served in our nation's armed forces
Served in
are the voices that need to be heard.
that need to be heard.
Especially by our children and grandchildren.
Especially by our children and grandchildren.
So that they learn the lessons.
So that they learn the lessons.
We fought so hard to learn.
We fought so hard to learn.
We can teach history.
We can teach history
As it has never been taught.
as
can be
and that can be
our living legacy.
legacy. I think that is a true statement. I think that there were times when a lot of us, depending on the trauma we went through, and the action we went through, was hard to talk about, and it's still hard to talk about. But I think those of us that can should, because there are so many people who are just now learning what the armed guard was all about. Ask someone what was the armed guard, and they think it was somebody marching up and down, marching up and down in front of a building with a rifle and so on. Now, let me tell you about one convoy that, bear with me for a moment or two. One convoy that was the most disastrous convoy ever be formed. And there was two, in fact, but one in particular. Both of them were condemned to fail, condemned to destruction, even before they were formed to sail. By Sir Winston Churchill and the British Admiralty. British Admiral Dudley Pound said to American Admiral King, "The Russian convoy is fast becoming a millstone around our necks." His counterpart, Admiral Hamilton, said, "The Russian convoy always has been and always will be an unsound operation of war." Both of these men were prophets in their own time, and I'll tell you why. Now, PQ-16 and PQ-17 was formed in Reykjavik, Iceland. Sail out of Reykjavik to the north, sail out of Reykjavik to the... Now, Iceland is here. They were formed here on this coast of Iceland, the southwest coast of Iceland, and they sailed north. Most of the escorts that they had were British escorts, and the commodore of the convoy sailed on a cruiser, on what was an American cruiser at that time. There were 3 American ships in this one escort. But first, PQ-16 was ordered to sail by Sir Winston Churchill, and he said this: "This convoy should sail if only half gets through." There were 35 ships in that convoy, most of them American. He was right. 14 got to Murmansk. The rest was completely destroyed by the German Navy, by the Air Force, out of western Norway, which was out of Trondheim and other areas along Norway's coast, up in here. And then he said about, now, there was a real tenorria about sinking the Tirpitz, the German battle wagon.
Yeah, Iceland.
They could never catch the Tirpitz or the Scharnhorst out at sea, because Hitler would never send his big ships out in the ocean, out in any ocean that held an aircraft carrier of any Allied nation. He was so afraid of aircraft carriers that he never challenged them, because he felt that if he did, he'd always come out a loser. So therefore, his ships stayed right in port. They stayed right where they are. They never did come out. They sent, PQ-17 was formed in Iceland. Another 35-ship convoy was formed here. And it, believe it or not, it was formed as bait for the Tirpitz. They figured if they sent they sent this convoy out, this valuable convoy out, the Turpits would come out and they'd nail her. She didn't come out. Figure out where she was. As I show on that map over there, the British sunk her at her dock in Trondheim, Norway. She never did come out. But what happened was, this 35-ship convoy took off out of Norway. They sailed north, and when they sailed north up here around Spitzenberg Island, which isn't on here, it's on this one, small here. It would be up about, they go up around here and down here into Murmansk and Archangel, which was in here and in here. And anyway, then when winter ice would start, they'd have to sail further south. And when they sailed south, that's when they really got racked up by the Germans. But they not only had to put up with submarines and planes and whatever they threw at them, they had to put up with monstrous seas that were pure hell, pure ice. The ice in storms that blew ice onto their superstructure and added tons of weight that could easily topple a ship or sink her. So they not only had to fight the enemy, they had to fight the natural enemy too. They had to steam the ice off, they had to hack it off, they had to get it off the ship any way they could so they could continue sailing. Well, this convoy, PQ-17, was 35 ships, most of them American. And when they got up north here, the British Admiralty sent a most urgent secret message to the convoy which happened to be Admiral Hamilton. He was on a cruiser. That they suspected a large German naval force was sailing north to destroy the convoy. Of course, that wasn't the case at all. They stayed right where they were. There was nobody coming out after PQ-17 at that point. Well, they panicked at the Admiralty, and they sent another message to Admiral Hamilton that the convoy should scatter and the escort should be removed. Now that Admiral Hamilton couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that this valuable convoy would be put into jeopardy. Now, this is what the escort consisted of. The naval escort consisted of 3 battleships, 3 heavy cruisers, 22 destroyers, and numerous other escorting ships. So they ordered the escorts withdrawn and the convoy to scatter for the 4 winds, leaving them to their own fate. Now, no one could believe this. The destroyer commander couldn't believe it. He hung around for an hour dilly-dallying, and actually the destroyers were supposed to stay there, but they decided as long as the rest of them went home, they might as well go too. So all the escort took off and left. Admiral Hamilton couldn't believe it. And he didn't order the scattering orders until an hour and a half, 2 hours after they had been delivered. He figured, well, he had no choice. So we ordered the ships to scatter to the 4 winds, and they were left at their own fate. The Germans couldn't believe this was happening. It was like being left in a candy store. So naturally, they brought out everything they could bring out, and they went after the convoy. Now, this is what happened. The convoy was attacked. I mean, it was attacked by the German 5th Air Force. It was attacked by 220 planes, 14 submarines, and other naval surface craft. Each ship was out there on its own. Now, this is what happened, and then we're finished. This was the hellish nightmare that went on day and night for endless days. The German 5th Air Force, consisting of 103 twin-engine junkers, 88s, 15 Heinkel torpedo bombers, 30 junkers, 87s, dive bombers, and 74 reconnaissance aircraft, plus a variety of other aircraft totaling 264 attempted to attack the ships of PQ-17. On their very first attack, they were prevented from dropping one bomb, firing one torpedo, or making a single strafing run by the courageous efforts of the doomed armed guard gunners of this doomed convoy. One ship, the Troubadour, fought by firing the guns from the tanks they carried on deck. The crew of the Troubadour in New York Harbor mutinied. They destroyed the guns. They destroyed the munitions. The port director ordered the armed guard officer and his men to take them in. They locked them up in the peak tanks up front, and that's where they were until they got to Iceland. They mutinied again. They got locked up in the same peak tanks. No guns, no ammunition. They had to fight with whatever they had. So the captain ordered instruction be given to the crew to fire these guns from these two tanks they carried on board. Now that ship did get to Murmansk, and it got back, talk about being snake bit, got back to Iceland safely. But anyway, to go on, courageous efforts of the armed guard gunners of this doomed convoy. One ship, the Troubadour, fought by firing guns from the tanks they carried on their decks. So much flak was thrown aloft that no German aircraft could penetrate it. If all this wasn't enough, a few days into this carnage, 11 U-boats joined in the attack. Alone and helpless, individual ships fought against overwhelming odds. Here is the result. 23 of 35 ships sunk. 9 ships and their crews lost. 14 ships with a total loss of 119 crewmen. Hard work totaling $700 million in total value lost, enough to equip an army of 50,000, including 297 aircraft, 594 tanks, 4,246 lorries and gun carriers, and 156,000 tons of cargo. Remember the prophecies of Hamilton and Pound? They came true. Oh, Winston Churchill, after this was over, he was just as aghast as Stalin was that such a valuable convoy would be put to task and destroyed. Stalin was so mad that he recalled his chief of staff from London, and he really put up some smoke between London and the United States. He wanted some answers. But looking back on it, Winston Churchill said, "We're horrendously shocked by the terrible losses," and he admitted his error. He said the decision to scatter was precipitate, and the destroyer withdrawal was certainly a mistake. All risks should have been taken in defense of the merchant ships. And isn't that the truth? And on that sad note, I end it, and I thank you very much.
There may be some questions a little bit later, but on the same subject, there's a book I checked out of the library before it was closed that I've read. It's on the same subject, if you can remember what we were talking about, convoys. This is Convoy by Martin Middlebrook, a 1976 publication, and it talks about another